Welcome to my presentation. I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we live and work and pay my respects to the elders of the past, the present, and emerging. In this presentation, I will be highlighting the issue of Year 12 attainment or completion for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students in our region in order to build an informed basis for our school to address this issue. From here on, I will use the term Indigenous to refer to the students. The data highlighted in this video comes from the most credible and relevant sources available, from the 2020 Closing the Gap report and the Australian Bureau of Statistics to the Aboriginal Affairs Community Portrait, which uses the 2016 census data to build a detailed impression of our local area. I have based my analysis on Easton's cycle of inquiry using the 4 stages to guide my data collection and resulting strategic plan. I will begin by building a broad picture and narrow the focus as we move through the presentation. Our region of the mid-north coast of New South Wales boasts a comparatively large Indigenous representation as compared to the rest of the state, 96% of whom identify as Aboriginal and only 4% identify as Torres Strait Islander. The total population of our local government area in Kempsey is 28,885, giving us around 3,350 Indigenous members. There are only 4 secondary schools in our region, 2 government and 2 non-government. The ICSEA value, an indicator of social advantage, falls below the national average of 1,000 for each school, giving us a picture of the region as below the national average generally. 3 out of 4 of the schools show a relatively strong Indigenous enrolment, above 20%, reflective of the regional population numbers. From the Year 12 graduating student cohorts, we can expect around 4 to 8 Indigenous students based on the enrolment figures, but this is not controlling for falling enrolments over the school years and thus is likely coming in a bit high. The data here shows how our Indigenous students are overrepresented at all age levels when it comes to early school leaving. Since the Year 10 leavers are the largest group, it is clear that any initiatives must start early in the school cycle, rather than focusing on the seniors if we are to see any real impact. This graph shows the gap between Indigenous and non-Indigenous Year 12 completion rate in our region is 11%. This graph also highlights how the numbers have changed over the decade and that while there is growth that has benefited both groups, it has not resulted in any real reduction of disparity. This slide highlights the fact that there are numerous complex causes for Indigenous students' early school leaving. As teachers, we must focus on the areas through which we can make a difference. 3 out of 5 of these barriers suggest that by making a personal choice to build our knowledge and upskill as professionals, we can make a difference as individuals. As a school, we can start by working on building better resources and facilities that are designed with Indigenous learners in mind. The 2020 Closing the Gap report also highlights many of the barriers that Indigenous students face to Year 12 completion, but also offers hope that through teachers, changes can occur that reduce these barriers. So we have now defined our issue. That is, our Indigenous students are far less likely than their non-Indigenous peers to complete Year 12, and that we as their teachers are a potential barrier unless we are determined on making the effort to upskill and increase our cultural competency, as well as collectively to build a strongly supportive environment that creates connections between our school and our Indigenous community beyond the school gates. We can now move on to the second stage of the cycle. In this stage, we are working out how to tackle the problem by gathering information on which to base our decisions. The best people to seek that information from must surely be the people who will be affected by our efforts, the Indigenous community. These 5 National Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Social Survey responses, or NATSIS, are the ones I have narrowed down to being the most relevant for us as teachers. The Connected Communities strategy currently being employed in select New South Wales schools uses very much the same ideas as those proposed in the NATSIS survey. Simply put, teachers must connect with the local community more, as well as offer individualised support to students. Schools need to partner with relevant community service providers, bringing all efforts under one roof and into one customised space. Our success depends heavily on effective leadership and governance that is genuinely determined to make a real difference at the grassroots level. This brings us to our strategic plan. I've broken this into 5 key areas. We will forge links with our Indigenous community beyond the school gates. We'll appoint an Indigenous staff member to act as a leader of the program and advocate for our school's Indigenous students. In consultation with the community groups, create or repurpose a space within the school that can become the hub for all Indigenous affairs. Equip the space with as many purpose-made Indigenous resources as we can source and utilise this space for all related events, learning and socialising. Throughout the process, we will need to ensure we collect and record our own data in order to track our progress. This is the 3rd stage of Eastern Cycle of Inquiry, and I will describe the kinds of methods we will use on the following slides. Whatever timeframe we decide upon, we will need to keep as detailed and accurate records as possible if we were to make any properly informed decisions down the track. We will need to record all numbers and quantities to reflect how many people and groups are involved in the plan, as well as our costs. So that will entail sign-in sheets, logbooks, and financial bookkeeping. For our qualitative data, in order to determine how the people involved are thinking and feeling, we will conduct regular surveys, both online and on paper. We'll provide an anonymous feedback box, encouraging our members to provide constructive ideas and comments without any potential for those people to feel there could be any risk in doing so. We now reach stage 4 of Eastern Cycle of Inquiry, where we will review our data in order to make a properly informed plan for moving forward. Our quantitative data will be input onto a spreadsheet to gain a broad picture that will help us determine any links and patterns. For our qualitative data, we will be conducting regular formalized meetings to ensure we make as many adjustments as necessary to our record-keeping process along the way, ensuring we are ironing out any kinks before they can affect the project outcome. Finally, we will hold a general meeting of all interested parties at which we will present our data and enable everyone's voices to be heard. We can then decide how to proceed with the plan based on the new information and potentially having enabled a collaborative environment in which to do so. With that, I now conclude the presentation and will take questions. Thank you for listening.